Most people don't think about the consequences before committing a crime, no matter how heinous it is. But the law doesn't hold back when it's time to punish the ones who have wronged society and robbed many of their rights, safety, property, and even lives. What's even strange is that people who have already been to jail also don't think twice about breaking the law. Most of these people are counting on never getting caught and never getting punished in case they do. What they don't know is that once their case goes to trial, there's no way to absolutely predict what the jury will decide. A lot of the time, the defendants aren't expecting a sentence, and when they are, it can sometimes be harsher and longer than they expected. Did you know that every 1 out of 5 people imprisoned in the world is incarcerated in the United States? Just in 2016, 2.2 million Americans were incarcerated. Since 1976, more than 7,800 defendants have been sentenced to death. So far, 1,500 of these have been executed. According to reports, as of December 2022, 2,599 convicts are still on death row. From serial murder to child abuse and even repeated assaults, all sorts of terrifying crimes and their perpetrators have been prosecuted in courts across the world, and some of them received sentences that made them rue the day that they even thought about breaking the law. Today we'll show you how convicts reacted after hearing their sentence, and honestly, it's not a pretty picture. Some of their reactions are incredibly disturbing, and you might need to take a minute to understand the convict's behavior. 1. Daunte Wright. This one has to be the creepiest reaction by a convicted person so far. Daunte Wright was only 17 years old when he brutally slayed a teenager named Jordan Klee from Ann Arbor. Jordan was 18 years old at the time of his death and was a student at Pioneer High School. He was supposed to be attending class at school. Instead, he was discovered shot dead in October 2016. His body was discovered by a maintenance worker. According to police, he died at Pine Lake Village Apartments just a few miles from his home. He was a high school senior and a good student who loved playing football. Daunte Wright was the accused killer and was supposed to have a pre-trial hearing for the case. Instead, he admitted to committing the crime on that day. According to Daunte, he along with 2 friends were trying to rob Jordan. Daunte admitted to shooting Jordan in the head when the prosecution questioned him whether he knew he'd killed him with that shot. He said yes. However, only a special kind of psychopath murders a young lad and then looks happy for doing that in court. At no point during the proceedings did he show even a minuscule amount of remorse. Instead, he attended all the hearings with a smile on his face. He seemed to be enjoying the pain of Klee's family. When Jordan's family read out their heartbreaking victim statement, his behavior was pure evil. He sat there, smiling, and even at times almost laughed. The judge was also disgusted by his behavior and asked the prosecutors if they thought his agreed sentence was too lenient. After all, his behavior would compel anyone to just send his case to trial directly and have him convicted for life. Daunte was sentenced to 25 to 52 years in prison in July 2017. Number 2. Jordan Fuss. Drinking and driving is one of the most immoral and potentially hazardous crimes anyone can commit. It's never a good idea, not even in an emergency situation. The story of Jordan Fuss, a 22-year-old belonging to Davie, is proof of that. He was driving under the influence of alcohol and resultantly caused a horrifying traffic accident. He'd been drinking rum and decided to drive his 2004 Infiniti G35 along with his passenger. Apparently, the passenger was the one who provided him with the beverage. However, later reports revealed marijuana was also found in his system. Just before midnight in the early autumn of 2014, Fuss was driving his vehicle in excess of 90 miles per hour when he crashed into another car at the intersection of Davie and Sterling Roads. Witnesses reported to the police that Jordan's car was swerving in between lanes before the crash and also didn't slow down as he approached the intersection. The sudden and powerful impact crushed the back of the other car, and it was virtually split into 2. Inside the car were Nancy Severda, her 14-year-old daughter, and 6-year-old son. Nancy and her daughter survived the crash, but little Santiago Mondragon, who was strapped in the back seat, was pronounced dead at the site. Fuss was charged with reckless driving, vehicular homicide, and DUI manslaughter as his blood alcohol level tested and 0.21%, which is 3 times the legal limit. During his court proceedings in 2017, he looked visibly scared. He was uncontrollably shaking, and it seems like he would burst out crying at any moment. His attorney tried to protect him from prison by emphasizing on his intense remorse, but the judge sentenced him to 14 years in prison. Fuss was seen crying throughout his proceedings. He kept apologizing and saying that he wished it was him who died in the crash. However, no amount of remorse can bring back the son Nancy Saverda and her family lost. Number 3. Cameron Herron. Cameron was the 18-year-old driver responsible for the lethal crash that killed a mother and her daughter on Bayshore Boulevard in 2018. According to reports, he was racing his friend Barano, who was driving a Nissan Altima on the 23rd of May 2018. Cameron was driving a black Ford Mustang he had received as a high school graduation gift recently. Jessica Reisinger Robinaugh was originally from Ohio, but she was visiting relatives in Tampa. The unsuspecting Jessica had gone out for a walk in the morning along with her 21-month-old daughter Lilia in a stroller. While crossing the roadway near Knights Avenue, Jessica and her daughter were hit by the Mustang and instantly killed. Both the boys pled guilty to vehicular manslaughter. Herron decided to let a judge guide his sentence. He expressed a lot of remorse for his actions. According to the state guidelines, a minimum penalty of 18 years was suggested, the maximum being 30. Herron's attorney tried to convince the court that there was reason for a sentence lower than the suggested minimum. However, he was sentenced to 24 years in total, 9 for the mother and 15 for the child. And from his reaction, it seems like he wasn't expecting this harsh penalty. The look of horror in his eyes was visible when the sentence was announced. Even though the mask he was wearing concealed his face, his mother was seen hugging him and crying for her son before he was taken by the police. A lot of people thought the sentence was unfair, and he began trending on TikTok with trends like "Justice for Cameron." However, even after the sentence was appealed, a 3-judge panel upheld his penalty, making him an example for all the rash drivers out there. Number 4. TJ Lane. Back in 2012, TJ Lane, a 17-year-old juvenile and former Chardon High School student, shot 6 Chardon High School students on February 27th. 3 of those unfortunate students died in the shooting. According to witnesses, the shooter had a personal rivalry with one of his victims. TJ used a bus in common with his victims and used a .22 caliber handgun to shoot his peers. 2 of the wounded students had to be hospitalized, one of whom sustained severe injuries that resulted in permanent paralysis. Ultimately, Lane was indicted on 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of aggravated attempted murder, and 1 count of felonious assault. Because he was just 17 at the time, Lane was detained as a juvenile, pending a decision on whether he should be tried as an adult or not. TJ was waiting for a bus to an alternative school when he shot the kids. Danny Patmerton, Russell King Jr., and Demetrius Hewlin were the names of the 3 boys who lost their lives. One might think that TJ simply snapped, but the prosecutor in his case went so far to call him a disgusting human being, and for good reason. TJ arrived at his court hearing wearing a blue button-down shirt, but after sitting down, he unbuttoned it, and from underneath he revealed a white t-shirt with the word "killer" written on the front. When he was given a chance to speak to the court, his reaction shocked everyone present in the room. His statement was short and crude, but filled with vile, hateful words directed towards his victims' families. He ended with sticking the middle finger to the courtroom. He smiled when family members of the victims called him an animal and even laughed at one of the mothers who spoke. Lane pled guilty and received 3 life sentences without parole in March 2013. Number 5. Trey Relford. In 2015, Salahuddin Jitmud was delivering pizza in Lexington, Kentucky when he was murdered. The death of the 22-year-old shook the entire local Muslim community. Salahuddin's father was known by many as he was the principal of a local Islamic academy and a respected figure. Trey and 2 accomplices stabbed Salahuddin and robbed him. He was making his final delivery on the night when he was attacked. Following a trial, Trey Alexander Relford was sentenced to 31 years in prison for his hate crime. They had previously pled guilty to complicity to murder, complicity to robbery, and attempted tampering with evidence in the stabbing death. Salahuddin was an aspiring artist who wanted to pursue a career in film, but sadly, his life was cut short. However, the world is full of kindness, and Salahuddin's father became the one to show his son's murderer some mercy. In heart-wrenching courtroom scenes, Dr. Abdul Munam Sabdat Jitmud offered Trey Relford his forgiveness. He also went on to say that he forgave Trey on behalf of Salahuddin and his mother. He said, "Forgiveness is the greatest gift, or charity in Islam. I have to pour myself out to forgive someone that has wronged our family." After his statement, Relford also expressed his remorse and apologized to the grief-stricken father of his family. The heartwarming scene of the 2 men hugging with tears streaming down their faces went viral on the internet and garnered a lot of love and respect from the masses. Number 6. Jennifer Mee. Jennifer Mee, who is also known as the Hiccup Girl for her long-lasting case of hiccups, was arrested for first-degree murder in 2010. She met up with a 22-year-old man she had encountered online. She lured the unsuspecting man to an empty house where, along with her 2 friends, she robbed and shot the man. They only managed to get $50 in this robbery that took a man's life. According to Florida law, Jennifer was considered as responsible as the person who pulled the trigger, as she was the one to lure him in. A .38 caliber handgun was used to shoot the victim, whose name was Shannon Griffin. He was shot 4 times, but police didn't know who pulled the trigger. Lee, along with her partners in crime, LaRon Rayford and Lamont Newton, were arrested within hours of the crime. Sergeant Skinner of the St. Petersburg Police Department stated that Mee and her accomplices admitted to their involvement in this heinous crime. Jennifer was charged with first-degree murder and a jury found her guilty. Her case got a lot of attention due to her previous fame as Hiccup Girl. Back in 2007, at the age of 15, she had developed a case of uncontrollable hiccups that gained her international fame. She appeared on television shows. The hiccups stopped after she was treated by Dr. Bob Lindy. Mee's mother was devastated by the verdict and could not get herself to go inside the courtroom. Jennifer broke down in tears just as the verdict was read. She had not expected the jury to convict her for first-degree murder. She had her hopes up that they would go for a less severe charge, like accessory to murder or manslaughter. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole, so her reaction wasn't out of the ordinary. Number 7. Diana Lovejoy. Divorce isn't easy on any couple, no matter how amicably it proceeds. And this is exactly what happened in Diana Lovejoy's case. For her, divorce was worth trying to end her partner's life. She was convicted for attempting to murder her husband. By profession, Diana was an American fitness instructor and coach. She was dead set on ending her then-husband Greg Mulvihill's life and did not even care about her son. Greg fortunately survived the attempt to end his life. She was sentenced to serve 23 years in imprisonment, and to say that her reaction to this sentence was bizarre would be an understatement. Just as the sentence was read out, Diana lowered her head on the table before her, and just at the moment everyone heard the word guilty, she passed out. Judge Sim von Kalinowski ordered the courtroom to be cleared so that Diana could receive medical attention. Soon after, she was taken from the courtroom on a gurney, and one paramedic explained to the reporters that she had apparently passed out from the shock. Anyone would faint on hearing a guilty verdict that meant a sentence of 25 years to life. Her firearm instructor, Weldon McDavid Jr., was the one who pulled the trigger, so he faced a sentence of 50 years to life. So why did she do that? According to a jury member, Diana didn't want to share her son's custody, nor did she want to pay her husband the $120,000 forming part of their divorce agreement. If only she knew it would all backfire in her face. Number 8. Franklin Williams. Franklin was one of the people who just didn't know when to shut up and let the adults do the talking. However, the Cleveland judge presiding his trial knew how to deal with a criminal like Franklin Williams. He appeared in court in 2018 to face charges including aggravated robbery and kidnapping. The judge tried his best to smoothly continue with the proceedings. However, Williams had other plans. He just wouldn't stop talking. The judge warned him multiple times, but eventually got frustrated by Williams' pretentious behavior. He had no choice but to take unprecedented action. The judge ordered the deputies to place red tape over Franklin's mouth to keep him from interrupting the court. Williams obviously was not happy by this method of silencing, so he began shouting things like freedom of speech, duct tape, and hashtag when he was being escorted out of the court. Williams' reaction was met with media uproar, and the judge's order was considered inhumane. Eventually, the matter blew up to the point that the judge decided to apologize for his questionable method of silencing Williams and refused himself from the case. Eventually, Williams got convicted of 3 armed robberies. Regarding the duct tape incident, he stated, "I am not an animal. Contrary to what people may think, I'm a man." Unfortunately for him, the judge who duct taped his mouth shut sentenced him to a shorter time than the next one, as he's now serving his 33-year-long sentence from prison. Number 9. Antonio Barbeau. Believe it or not, but Antonio was only 14 years old when he was sentenced to a minimum of 36 years in prison. He was convicted for the murder of his 78-year-old great-grandmother with a hatchet. He visited Barbara Olson's home with his friend named Nathan. They had planned on stealing money from her home, which they did, but afterwards they beat the poor old lady with a hatchet and a hammer. It's unfathomable how young teenage boys can commit such a horrifying crime. And he didn't kill just anyone. It was his own great-grandmother whose life he took. When he was read his sentence and was allowed to read out his statement, Antonio burst into tears. The severity of his penalty and the horrific nature of his crime probably dawned on him. He couldn't read out the statement and passed it to his defense attorney to read on his behalf. The attorney also fought back tears while reading the statement. According to the reports, in 2013, Antonio's great-grandmother invited the boys inside her home, and when she turned to call Antonio's mother, he struck her with a hatchet. Antonio felt sick and ran into the bathroom. Behind him, Nathan hit Barbara again and again until she was dead. The judge, Timothy Von Akron, stated that the 36-year sentence was a minimum for this terrible crime. He also said he had never seen anything close to this crime in his 24 years on the bench. Antonio will be almost 50 years old when he becomes eligible for release. Number 10. Esteban Carpio. Esteban Carpio was being questioned by Providence police detectives in an ongoing investigation. He was a person of interest in the stabbing of the 85-year-old woman named Madeline Gatta. During the questioning on April 17, 2005, one of the detectives left the questioning room to get water for Carpio. The room was on the 3rd floor of the building. Detective Sergeant James L. Allen was sitting in the room with Esteban, who took the opportunity, grabbed Allen's gun, and shot him twice, consequently killing him. Afterwards, he jumped out the window but was apprehended in just 45 minutes. He actually killed the detective inside the Providence Police headquarters. At his arraignment, he was brought to court with a mask on his face, keeping him from spitting or biting at others. His cheek, forehead, and cranial region were swollen. His eyes were frighteningly red. His family made accusations of police brutality, but according to Providence Police Chief Dean M. Esserman, the injuries were from his fall from the 3rd floor window. However, during his testimony, a state police officer, Christopher Zarella, confessed that he had punched Carpio thrice in the face. An FBI investigation concluded that no excess force was used by Providence police. The jury didn't buy his insanity defense, nor did his condition in the courtroom deter them. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But more than his reaction to the sentence, his family's uproar and outrage in the courtroom on hearing his life sentence made the news. They stood their ground, saying he had been tortured and brutally beaten in police custody. Number 11. Anthony Rodriguez. There's only 2 ways to react to a prison sentence: accepting it like a grown-up and taking responsibility for your actions, or acting out and claiming you were treated unjustly. Most people facing long-term sentences tend to react the second way. In 2012, Anthony Rodriguez sexually assaulted a woman in Bakersfield, California. He claimed in the court that he was innocent and did nothing wrong. The DNA evidence, however, proved his involvement in the crime, and he was arrested soon after. 3 months later, the court found him guilty, and he was sentenced 25 years to life in prison. His reaction to the sentence was exactly like anyone would expect. He claimed that the judgment was unjust, but he didn't just stop there. In fact, he began hurling curse words at the judge and bailiffs. He stood up and started arguing, but was made to sit down. Rodriguez had a violent history, but he had never committed a sexual offense previously. His family was heartbroken by the sentence, but his reaction only tarnished his image in the media. He and his family truly believed that this being his first sexual offense deserved a more lenient sentence. However, the court definitely did not budge on the matter. Number 12. Tiffany Moss. Tiffany Nicole Moss was the woman who starved her 10-year-old stepdaughter, Imani Gabrielle Moss, to death in Lawrenceville, Georgia. This case became the basis for reforms in Georgia's child welfare system. Due to the severe nature, Tiffany's crime gained a lot of media attention. Tiffany abused Imani for several years prior to her death. She eventually died of starvation on October 28, 2013. At the time of her death, she weighed a mere 15 kilograms, the weight of an average toddler. In 2019, Tiffany was convicted of malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of first-degree cruelty to children, and concealing the death of another. The court sentenced Tiffany to death plus 20 years. The case had no margin for leniency, and Tiffany was given an exemplary punishment. This was one of the worst cases that made everyone involved in the case feel sick to their stomach. Tiffany is currently incarcerated at Arundel State Prison and is the only female death row inmate in Georgia. Tiffany stood alone at her table as the verdict was read to her. There wasn't even a defense attorney present beside her. For someone sentenced to death, Tiffany was quite composed and there was no sign of remorse. She just nodded and quietly waited for the judge to finish reading. Number 13. Michael Madison. Michael Madison is a serial killer from East Cleveland, Ohio. He's known to have committed at least 3 murders. All of his victims were women. He was convicted for 3 counts of sexually motivated aggravated murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, sexual assault, attempted sexual assault, 3 counts of abuse of a corpse, and having a weapon under disability. His trial began in April 2016 and concluded with a guilty verdict on May 5, 2015. The jury spent less than a day deliberating and declared him guilty for the murders of Sherelda Terry, Shatisa Sheely, and Angela Deskins. On May 20, 2016, the same jury recommended a death sentence for him. There wasn't an ounce of remorse expressed by him. In fact, during sentencing, he was seen smirking and smugly looking at the judge. His behavior caused Van Terry, the father of Sherelda Terry, to lunge at Madison in a fit of rage and grief. The deputies immediately tried to stop him and escorted him out. He was released without charges. The judge sympathized with the grief-stricken father of the victim, and frankly, everyone understood how terrible the smirk on Madison's face made Terry feel. Number 14. Van Brett Watkins. Watkins is a hitman who got entangled in the 1999 murder of Shericka Adams. Shericka was the girlfriend of NFL player Ray Carruth. On November 16, 1999, a call was made to 911 from Charlotte, North Carolina around 12:30 a.m. The caller was Shericka Adams, and she reported that she had been shot. The 24-year-old was 8 months pregnant. She informed the operator that she had been shot in the neck and back while driving, but somehow managed to pull her car into a driveway. On inquiry, she reported that her baby daddy, Ray Carruth, was in the car ahead of her, and he just sped away when someone slowed down beside the car and shot her. Emergency services reached her in around 12 minutes, only to find out she had been shot 4 times. Her baby was delivered by C-section an hour after she was shot. The doctors did not give a good prognosis for the little baby, Chancellor Lee Adams, but he survived. She slipped into a coma afterwards, and about a month later, Shericka passed away. In North Carolina, Ray Carruth was a huge deal. He was almost royalty in the world of football, so his girlfriend being shot to death caused a stir around the country. Carruth was naturally the first suspect, and according to him, he and Shericka had no strings attached sort of relationship. He stated that there was nothing serious, but Shericka's friends said that having children and settling down with Ray was always her plan. This meant when a pregnancy was discovered, she wanted to keep the baby. However, sources close to her stated that Ray had been pressuring her to abort, to which she disagreed. Prosecution argued that Carruth had planned to murder Shericka with the help of Watkins and another controlled substance dealer named Michael Kennedy. Carruth's defense team tried putting all the blame on Watkins, stating the murder was not premeditated and was in fact a result of a deal gone wrong. Watkins was the triggerman, and he testified that Carruth paid him $3,000 in advance and promised to pay $3,000 after the job was done. He stalked Shericka for months before he finally assaulted her using the weapon acquired by Kennedy. Carruth and Kennedy boxed in Shericka's car, allowing Watkins to shoot her. Watkins sobbed while testifying and showed remorse for his actions. In January 2001, Carruth was sentenced. Watkins took a second-degree murder plea. He will not be released before 2046. During the court proceedings, he looked remorseful, but his demeanor also exuded a whole lot of anger, probably directed towards Carruth. There's definitely going to be bad blood between the two even after Watkins gets released.